Why do the ruthless always seem to win? You see it everywhere. The corrupt rise, the honest fall, and the world applauds the ones who lie best. We were told that goodness always triumphs, that honesty brings peace, that truth will somehow prevail. But look closer. It rarely does. What if evil wins? Not because it's stronger, but because it understands the game better? Because it plays by rules that good people refuse to? Maybe the problem isn't that the world is broken. Maybe it's that goodness has never learned how power truly works. You see it every day. The corrupt CEO who keeps climbing. The dictator praised as a visionary. The selfish friend who always ends up on top, while the kind-hearted one fades into silence. It feels wrong, doesn't it? Deep down, we've been taught that goodness should prevail, that honesty should be rewarded, that doing the right thing eventually leads to peace. But then life steps in and whispers something darker, that the world doesn't play by those rules. Maybe you've lived it. You worked hard, stayed honest, played fair, and still, you watch someone cut corners, lie, and walk away with everything you deserved. You told yourself it's temporary, that karma will catch up. But what if it never does? What if the scales are permanently tilted? Not by chance, but by design? What if evil wins? Not because it's stronger, but because it's willing to do what we refuse to? Niccolò Machiavelli, the Italian philosopher of power, faced this truth centuries ago, and it terrified people. He saw that those who rise often do so by abandoning the illusions that hold others back, while the virtuous hesitate, the ruthless act, while the moral debate, the cunning execute. His message wasn't a call to cruelty, but a warning about reality. Power doesn't reward goodness. It rewards strategy. To survive in a world ruled by ambition, one must understand, morality and power are rarely allies. Think about it. A person who feels guilty before acting will always move slower than one who feels none. A person who values fairness will always be vulnerable to someone who doesn't. And yet we expect fairness to prevail, as if the universe itself enforces it. But Machiavelli's forgotten truth was this: morality exists in our hearts, not in the laws of power. The game of survival has no referee. Those who understand this play freely. Those who don't keep waiting for justice that never comes. It's not that evil always wins because it's smarter or more deserving. It wins because it doesn't flinch. It crosses lines the good won't even approach. It wears masks, charm, confidence, authority. And the world, desperate for certainty, mistakes those masks for virtue. The good are too sincere to play the game, too honest to deceive, too cautious to strike first. And so they lose, again and again, not for lack of strength, but for excess of conscience. This isn't a call to abandon goodness. It's a challenge to see the battlefield clearly. The world does not reward purity. It rewards perception. Those who thrive understand that to face evil, one must first understand its nature, not from the comfort of ideals, but from the rawness of truth. That's the lesson Machiavelli left behind. Not to become ruthless, but to stop being blind. Because evil doesn't win because it's right. It wins because it's willing to do what good people pretend isn't necessary. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince, he wasn't trying to glorify evil. He was trying to expose how the world truly works. For centuries, humanity had wrapped itself in comforting illusions. That virtue triumphs, that honesty wins loyalty, that justice protects the just. But Machiavelli tore through that fantasy with a single, chilling observation. A ruler who always tries to be good will be ruined among so many who are not. It was heresy, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. He had lived through chaos. Florence, his beloved city, had fallen not to monsters, but to those who understood power better than the moralists who ruled before them. Machiavelli watched idealists make speeches, while opportunists took action. He saw kind men silenced, honest men exiled, and cunning men rise through the smoke of collapsing empires. It wasn't that goodness failed. It was that goodness refused to adapt. In a world where betrayal was currency, integrity was a luxury few could afford. Look at history's contrasts. Cicero, the moral philosopher, believed words could save Rome. Caesar, the opportunist, believed only power could. Cicero spoke of justice. Caesar acted on ambition. Guess which one's statue still stands? The tragedy isn't that Cicero was wrong. It's that he never understood the language of survival. Virtue without pragmatism is fragile, and Machiavelli knew this. To him, morality without strategy wasn't noble. It was dangerous. And this pattern, it repeats in every era. The whistleblower who dares to expose corruption often loses everything: career, safety, peace. The reformer who believes systems want to change learns the opposite. Those who play by the rules, in a game rigged against them, aren't rewarded for honesty. They're devoured by it. It's a brutal truth, but Machiavelli forced us to confront it. Goodness, when absolute, becomes predictable, and what's predictable is exploitable. He understood the psychology of power long before modern science gave it names. The cunning exploit the moral certainty of others, because certainty makes people slow, hesitant, and easy to read. The good act from belief, the ruthless act from necessity. One defends ideals, the other defends outcomes. And in a world built on motion and perception, it's the one who moves first, not the one who's right, who wins. Machiavelli never said abandon goodness. He said understand its limits. Power doesn't respect purity. It respects control, the ability to decide when to be kind, when to forgive, and when to strike. That was his hidden art. But most of us were raised to believe that restraint is weakness, that force is corruption. To Machiavelli, refusing to use power was the same as surrendering it. And so the heresy remains. In a world full of wolves, to act like a lamb is not virtue, it's self-destruction. Those who cling blindly to goodness are not saving the world, they're offering themselves to it. Until we understand the truth Machiavelli saw, we'll keep confusing innocence for wisdom and watch the powerful rewrite morality, while the moral fade quietly into history. We like to believe that leadership is built on integrity, that those who rise to power do so because they care, because they inspire, because they serve. But psychology tells a different story. Again and again, research reveals a darker truth. The people who rise the fastest are not the kindest, nor the most capable. They are the least restrained by conscience. Studies on what psychologists call the dark triad, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, show a disturbing pattern. These traits, the ones we're taught to fear, are the same ones the modern world quietly rewards. A narcissist exudes confidence, even when it's built on air. A psychopath takes risks, without fear of failure. And the Machiavellian, the strategist, reads human motives like a map. Together, they form a kind of psychological armor, one that shields them from doubt, from guilt, from hesitation. In corporate hierarchies and political systems, these traits are often mistaken for leadership. Confidence looks like competence. Detachment looks like focus. Ruthlessness looks like strength. And while the moral hesitate, the immoral move decisively, not because they're better, but because they feel less. Moral disengagement is the mechanism that makes this possible. It allows people to justify cruelty as necessity, deceit as strategy, and exploitation as ambition. It's what lets a CEO fire hundreds, while calling it optimization. It's what lets a politician lie and call it diplomacy. They don't see evil, they see efficiency. And that difference in perception creates power, because when empathy is a brake, they've learned to drive without one. Machiavelli would have recognized this instantly. When he spoke of virtue, he didn't mean virtue in the moral sense. He meant effectiveness, the courage, cunning, and adaptability to shape events, rather than be shaped by them. To him, the ruler who survived wasn't the most ethical, but the most capable of bending morality to circumstance. He understood that human systems reward not goodness, but results, and those who can act without emotional interference are, paradoxically, the ones most capable of achieving them. Modern psychology now confirms what Machiavelli saw 500 years ago. Studies from Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard show that individuals with moderate dark triad traits are more likely to be selected as leaders, not despite their ruthlessness, but because of it. They project authority, they take control, They appear fearless when others falter. And in environments obsessed with performance and certainty, those qualities seduce. We mistake emotional coldness for strength, manipulation for intelligence, and charisma for moral clarity. The result? A system where the least empathetic often end up steering the fate of the empathetic. But here's the most unsettling part. Morality might not even be evolutionarily rewarded. For most of human history, survival depended not on kindness, but on dominance. Cooperation evolved as a strategy, not as a virtue. Those willing to deceive or exploit when necessary often ensured their lineage's survival. Goodness, in evolutionary terms, was never the rule. It was the exception. So when Machiavelli looked at the chaos of his time and said that a ruler must learn how not to be good, he wasn't endorsing evil. He was describing evolution in motion. To him, the truly powerful were not saints, but survivors. They understood that in a world where fear governs obedience and perception shapes truth, empathy must be managed like a weapon, used sparingly, and never at the expense of control. And perhaps that's the real tragedy. The very traits that make someone dangerous in private life are often the same traits that make them successful in public life. The line between leadership and manipulation, between courage and cruelty, between confidence and delusion, is far thinner than we'd like to admit. We keep searching for moral heroes to lead us, but history and psychology suggest otherwise. Those who rise the highest are rarely the ones with the softest hearts. We like to think that evil succeeds because of a few bad people, corrupt leaders, greedy executives, manipulative influencers. But what if the real problem runs deeper? What if it's not the people who are broken, but the systems themselves? Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He warned that power doesn't need to corrupt individuals when it can simply build environments that reward corruption, systems that prize results over integrity, perception over truth, and loyalty over honesty. Look at any major institution, politics, corporations, media, and you'll see it. The incentives aren't designed for morality. They're designed for outcomes, the kind that can be measured, marketed, and monetized. A politician wins by appearing trustworthy, not by being it. A CEO earns bonuses for quarterly growth, not long-term ethics. A media outlet thrives on outrage, not accuracy. When success is defined by optics, deceit becomes strategy, and those who play clean rarely make it to the top because the game itself was built to favor illusion. Machiavelli understood this dynamic long before it had a name. In The Prince, he wrote that a ruler must learn to appear merciful, faithful, and upright, but only appear, because people judge more by what they see than by what they experience. Modern PR, corporate branding, political spin, they're all just Machiavelli's philosophy, repackaged in modern clothes. We don't elect the most moral leaders. We elect the best performers. We don't follow the most truthful voices. We follow the loudest ones, the ones that tell us what we wish to believe. What makes these systems so effective is the diffusion of responsibility. When an immoral decision passes through layers of bureaucracy, no single person feels accountable. A company that exploits workers calls it policy. A government that spreads propaganda calls it national interest. A media outlet that distorts reality calls it engagement. Morality dissolves when no one feels the weight of consequence. As Machiavelli foresaw, power thrives best in the fog, where everyone is responsible, yet no one truly is. Then there's the illusion of delayed feedback, the moral time lag. Corruption doesn't collapse instantly. Fraudulent empires, political lies, and moral deceptions often work for years before they fall apart. Think of financial scandals once celebrated as innovation, leaders hailed as visionaries, until their empires rot from within. For a time, evil looks efficient. The short-term rewards are real, and the reckoning always feels distant. The system learns the wrong lesson. That deceit works, and decency doesn't. This is the quiet genius of power. It hides its nature beneath efficiency. Those who question it are labeled naive. Those who expose it are replaced. Institutions that were meant to protect morality have learned to package immorality as progress. It's not that evil disguises itself as good anymore. It's that good is no longer profitable, unless it looks like evil pretending to be good. Machiavelli would not have been surprised. He wrote that appearances are more powerful than truth, because people see what you seem to be, but feel what you are only rarely. 500 years later, nothing has changed. Our world still rewards the illusion of virtue, more than the presence of it. Systems built to measure performance cannot measure conscience, and so they reward those who know how to fake it best. And yet, a question lingers beneath all this. If power thrives where accountability fades, if deceit can masquerade as success for decades, then what chance does goodness have? Can morality ever survive inside systems designed to destroy it? Or is the world destined to keep rewarding the mask while punishing the face beneath it? We often ask, why do good people struggle to compete in a world that rewards ruthlessness? It's not because they're weak or naive or unaware of how the game is played. It's because their conscience stands in the way of their instinct. While the ruthless act without hesitation, the moral pause. They think, they question, and they weigh the cost. Their strength lies in empathy, but empathy slows the hand that must strike. Their clarity lies in reflection, but reflection delays the moment of decision. And in a world that moves fast, hesitation is fatal. Psychologists call this empathic inhibition, the tendency for compassion to interrupt action. A person who feels deeply cannot harm easily. They calculate the ripple effects, the pain, the ethics, while their competitor, unburdened by guilt, simply moves. Then comes analysis paralysis, the mind's desperate attempt to find a perfect, moral solution where none exists. The good search for fairness in an unfair world. And by the time they find their footing, the ruthless have already won. Machiavelli saw this clearly. He wrote, "A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must come to ruin among so many who are not." To him, moral restraint was noble in the heart, but dangerous in politics. Because power, by its nature, is not earned through goodness. It is seized through decision. And decisions made without compromise are decisions made quickly. Good people, by contrast, live in the weight of their own awareness. They see the humanity in those they oppose, and that makes them hesitate just long enough to lose their advantage. History repeats this paradox again and again. Socrates, whose devotion to truth became his downfall. Kant, whose pursuit of pure ethics created ideals too rigid for human survival. Their integrity was pure, but purity has no armor. It's why, across time, good men and women are silenced, not by evil strength, but by their own inability to wield power without guilt. Conscience is both their gift and their curse. It keeps them human, but prevents them from winning. In a sense, morality blindsides itself. The good assume that truth and justice carry their own momentum, that right will naturally defeat wrong. But Machiavelli warned otherwise. The world does not reward those who wait for justice. It rewards those who act as if they are justice. The moral person doubts before doing harm, even to prevent greater harm. The immoral person does harm first and rationalizes it later. The difference isn't intelligence, it's inhibition. And so, the moral paradox unfolds. The very traits that make someone admirable, empathy, restraint, integrity, are the same traits that limit their capacity to fight in systems built for aggression. They win in spirit, but lose in practice. They change hearts, but not hierarchies. And maybe that's why, century after century, good people walk away disillusioned, wondering why decency never seems to triumph. The answer isn't that they're wrong. It's that they're playing by rules the world never agreed to. Fear and desire, two forces older than civilization itself, and still, the invisible hands that move the world. Machiavelli understood this long before psychology gave it language. "It is better to be feared than loved," he wrote, "if you cannot be both." To him, love was fragile. It depended on trust, loyalty, and emotion. But fear was reliable. It could be controlled, engineered, sustained. Fear doesn't ask for fairness. It obeys. Modern psychology confirms what Machiavelli only intuited. Fear is the brain's most ancient motivator. The amygdala's alarm bell that overrides logic, morality, even empathy. It narrows perception. It drives obedience. It silences dissent. And so, those who understand fear, not as emotion, but as instrument, hold a kind of power immune to reason. They can make people move, buy, follow, worship, not because they believe, but because they feel. Desire, too, is its twin. If fear controls through threat, desire controls through promise. The promise of status, validation, belonging. Leaders, corporations, influencers, all exploit these twin currents with surgical precision. They build systems that alternate between fear of loss and hope of reward. The result is obedience disguised as aspiration. People think they're chasing dreams, when in truth, they're following orders. We see this everywhere. Politicians amplify tribal fear, us versus them. Corporations weaponize desire, selling identity instead of utility. Media thrives on outrage, because fear and anger hold attention longer than joy. Fear keeps you watching. Desire keeps you buying. Both keep you controlled. Even moral movements, those born from noble intentions, are not immune. Every ideology eventually learns the language of manipulation, because emotion persuades more deeply than truth. The good begin using the same tactics as the corrupt. Fear of exclusion, desire for virtue, outrage as loyalty, and before long, the line between moral conviction and emotional control begins to blur. Machiavelli would have smiled at the irony, how even the righteous must borrow the methods of the wicked to survive. From a neuroscientific view, this isn't coincidence, it's conditioning. Humans are wired to respond to emotional extremes. Fear conditioning teaches obedience. Status signaling maintains hierarchy. Emotional contagion spreads the dominant mood like a virus. Those who understand these mechanisms don't need to force control. They simply trigger it. Machiavelli's prince, reborn in modern times, wears many masks. The CEO, the influencer, the activist, the algorithm. And yet, beneath every mask, the same rhythm beats. Fear and desire, carefully balanced to maintain order. Too much fear breeds rebellion. Too much desire breeds complacency. True power lies in the space between them, to terrify just enough, to tempt just enough, to keep people moving but never awakening. Machiavelli's forgotten truth was never about cruelty for its own sake. It was about control through understanding. He saw that love can fade, ideals can fracture, but fear and desire are eternal. They are the quiet architects of every empire, every movement, every mind. And if evil so often wins, perhaps it's because it has mastered the art of speaking to what we feel, while good still tries to reason with what we think. For a moment, let the noise fade. The wars, the propaganda, the manipulation. Beneath it all lies something simple, something Machiavelli saw, but few ever understood. He wasn't praising evil. He was warning us. Evil wins when good refuses to see how the game is played. His words were never a celebration of deceit. They were a mirror, held up to human nature, forcing us to confront our illusions about virtue and power. The real tragedy isn't that the wicked rise. It's that the good remain naive. They mistake purity for strength, kindness for strategy. They believe goodness alone can move systems built to reward cunning. But goodness without clarity becomes sacrifice. To fight evil, one must first understand its logic. That is what Machiavelli meant by virtue. Not morality, but mastery. The strength to see clearly, to act decisively, and still remain whole. This is where enlightened realism begins. Not in cynicism, but in awareness. To recognize manipulation without becoming manipulative. To understand fear without spreading it. To wield influence without losing integrity. It's not a retreat from morality. It's its evolution, where conscience becomes informed, not blind. Because conscience itself is power. It carries an intelligence that evil cannot replicate. The ability to choose restraint when domination seems easier. Where fear seeks control, conscience seeks understanding. And clarity dissolves manipulation. When you see the game for what it is, the illusion loses its hold. Perhaps this is what Machiavelli hoped someone would realize centuries later, that the antidote to corruption isn't innocence, but wisdom. That real virtue isn't passive, it's strategic. It knows when to yield, when to strike, and when to walk away. It understands that light is not the absence of shadow, but its awareness. And so, breaking the cycle doesn't mean rejecting power. It means reclaiming it, guided not by fear or desire, but by clarity. Evil thrives in confusion, but it dissolves in understanding. The moment you see through its tactics, it loses its edge. That is the hidden power of conscience. Quiet, deliberate, awake, not the weapon of the naive, but the armor of the wise. In the end, evil wins not because it is stronger, but because it understands the human heart, its fears, its desires, its quiet hunger to belong. It studies the shadows we ignore, and it uses them. But goodness, true goodness, endures when it understands itself. When it learns that compassion without awareness becomes naivete, and strength without empathy becomes tyranny. Machiavelli never glorified darkness. He revealed it. He showed that power is neither moral nor immoral. It is only shaped by the hand that wields it. It is not titles that honor men, he wrote, but men that honor titles. In other words, nobility does not come from crowns or systems or institutions. It comes from consciousness, from those who rise above them. To fight darkness, you must first see how it operates, within others and within yourself. Because the line between good and evil has never been a wall dividing two worlds. It runs quietly, through every human heart. To see it clearly is not surrender, it's illumination. And if this exploration made you think, if it made you pause, even for a moment, then stay. Share this reflection, not as noise, but as awareness. Because every mind that awakens weakens the grip of deceit. The world doesn't need more blind virtue or clever corruption. It needs wisdom, calm, grounded, unafraid to see the truth, yet still choosing light.